article. So, I've been saying this is the United Corporations of America forever. I've been saying that we're pretty much living in, whether it's financial cover-ups, whether it's police cover-ups, the cover-up in Flint, governmental cover-ups. We're in a sea of cover-ups, and the corporate media exists to cover up what's going on. They exist to cover up. And it's very rare that a corporate media outlet or the media in general will call something what it is, a cover-up. But it looks like as more information comes out, what's going on in Louisiana with Ronald Green is an old-fashioned cover-up. This just came in from the Associated Press. Top cop in black man's deadly arrest, withheld camera video. Let me read for you. In perhaps the strongest evidence yet of an attempted cover-up in the deadly 2019 arrest of Ronald Green, the ranking Louisiana State police officer at the scene falsely told internal investigators that the black man was still a threat to flee after he was shackled. And he denied the existence of his own body camera video for nearly 2 years until it emerged just last month. New state police documents obtained by the AP show numerous inconsistencies between Lieutenant John Clary's statements to detectives and the body camera footage he denied having. They add to growing evidence of obfuscation in Green's death, which the white troopers initially blamed on a car crash at the end of a high-speed chase and is now the subject of a federal civil rights investigation. So if you don't know the story, this black man, Ronald Green, was essentially strangled to death, a la George Floyd. He said, "I'm fearful," and they just kept on strangling him to death, even though he was pinned down with cuffs on. And now they said, "Oh, he died of a car crash." Remember, injuries of a car accident. That wasn't the case. Apparently the chief officer on the scene didn't have his body camera on. I wonder why, and denied the existence of a body cam video for nearly 2 years. And falsely told investigators that he was fleeing, although he was shackled down, dying as they strangled him. And this comes, by the way, obviously we were on the ground covering the Andrew Brown story. This comes as, while I was gone on my honeymoon, they released the video from that. They say the video, well, they released some of the video. They haven't released all of the video. But the part that they released show the police came in G.I. Joe style on Andrew Brown in North Carolina with Uzis, big ass guns, including one semi-automatic gun. Within seconds, they were at his car, guns pointed at him. Maybe there's a different way you could approach a suspect. He was suspected of cocaine or something like that. So I don't know. If I have a bunch of G.I. Joes pointing guns at my car and I'm a black man, and I'm not a black man, I probably would get the fuck out of there, just like Andrew Brown did. Because they're pointing guns at your car, and we know what police have done to people like Andrew Brown all over this country and all over this world. So Andrew Brown backed up. No police were behind him. Then he tried to flee. Again, not a capital punishment. And as he tried to flee, he didn't run into any police officers. Police officers were around his car, and they started shooting like at the gun range at a target. That's what happened. But the district attorney there, who, from my research, is corrupt, so is the judge who wouldn't release the footage, the district attorney spun that video into that Andrew Brown was using his car as a weapon. Well, they came out right away, jumped off the truck with weapons pointed at this man. What would you like him to do? Call of Duty, cosplay. Would you like him to sit there as a sitting duck as they shoot him to death, or try to get away? So as he tried to get away, I watched the video about 7 or 8 times. He didn't back up on any police. And when he drove off, he didn't hit any police. He was going in the opposite direction of police. But the district attorney says no police, no action will be taken. Media doesn't question. Should they have come in Call of Duty style with all those guns? They required what looked like 7 or 8 police officers. Several of the police officers didn't have their body cam footage on. So those police officers are getting off. And by the way, the only reason that these police officers in Louisiana might see justice is because the body cam leaked. The body cam leaked of what happened with Ronald Green. They sat on this for 2 years, including the governor of Louisiana, a Democrat. So to me, I don't want to minimize what happened with Ronald Green because it's heinous. If you saw the video, I mean, they're strangling the man to death for no reason. Strangling the man to death for no reason. You could tell these police officers, this isn't a training issue. This is a brutality issue. This is a mentality issue. This is a racism issue. This is a too much testosterone issue. And this is a racism issue. You can't train or retrain cops not to be like that. But to me, I think, and we're not going to get much from Joe Biden, author of the crime bill, but to me, what really stands out about the Ronald Green tape, how many more Ronald Greens are there out there? This was 2 years ago that this happened. How many more tapes are being hidden? How many more sergeants, a Louisiana State police officer at the scene falsely told internal investigators that the black man was still a threat to flee after he was shackled, and he denied the existence of his own body camera footage? How many more of those are there? How many district attorneys, who are elected, by the way, and are in bed with the police and in bed with the police unions, are covering all these things up? Instead of seeking justice for people like Ronald Green, are trying to protect and cover the asses of the police murdering Ronald Greens. It's a rhetorical question, but you know the answer is a lot. And it's not just black men. It's a lot of Latino men being brutalized or murdered. Now, black women we're seeing more and more. And we have bills, the George Floyd policing reform bill, as if this can be reformed. I don't want to shit on every single police officer. I actually know one or two that I went to high school with who aren't barbarians, as far as I know. But this is not bad apples. This is a corrupt murdering squad who attempt to cover things up, frankly, like organized crime tries to cover murder up. And again, what happened with Ronald Green is murder. The police officers murdered him. They should be arrested. But those who tried to cover it up should also be arrested. And frankly, at this point, it's not going to happen unless we make it happen. You know how they had contact tracers for COVID? You know, we need contact tracers in the form of psychiatrists, mental health professionals. We need to put psychiatrists in every single police department in this country. Don't let the police out of the police department for days and weeks, if need be. This is a crisis, and you need every single psychiatrist, head-to-toe evaluations of these police officers with the most stringent testing for PTSD, mental health issues, racial bias, you name it. And if you do that, I'd venture to guess 60 to 70% of their badges would be taken. That's what needs to happen. You want to call it defund? You want to call it abolish? I don't care what you call it. But when you see the video of these instances, and by the way, if we ever saw the video of what happened to Breonna Taylor, let's not forget all the people that there's not video for, or Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, et cetera, et cetera. Those police officers would probably look the same way. Overzealous, barbarians, not at all concerned about protecting themselves. Protecting the people that they have on the ground strangling to death, but mostly concerned with protecting themselves against an irrational fear. The police that went in Uzi style on Andrew Brown automatically assumed that Andrew Brown was a threat. Yeah, he had a criminal rap sheet. That's okay. A lot of people do. A lot of white people have criminal rap sheets. I promise you, they wouldn't have showed up to a white person's house for a cocaine subpoena, a subpoena over selling cocaine or something like that, with 7 police officers look like SEAL Team 6 with their Uzis out, pointed at him. Wouldn't happen. By the way, thank you very much for the super chat. Kelly Elaine, $50. Keep going, Status Coup. Covering what others do not. That is correct. Thank you, Faint Signals from Vega. Nice to see you again, Jordan. May Status Coup go from strength to strength. Heart Palestine will be free. BDS. I will be covering that in a little bit, so stay tuned. If I could, I'd own shares of Status Quo. We're not publicly traded, but we are traded on YouTube. So hit us in the super chat. Also, the GoFundMe is still rocking. We raised a lot of money while I was gone, so thank you to everybody who has donated. We really appreciate it. But I got to tell you something, okay? Biden, that's the next story, who, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, excuse me if I'm being inappropriate. It's like political sexual favors all day long on Joe Biden. He's getting no pressure from anywhere. He has been anointed as FDR's heir apparent, which is absurd gaslighting, absurd manufacturing consent. But literally, you have murderers, and it's not only Biden. This happened long before Biden. But how much more evidence do you need that this is not reformable? You can't reform a mentality of racism, barbarism, not looking at the people you're supposed to be protecting as humans, and then covering it up. How do you trust police reports after so many examples of the police straight up lying? How do you trust district attorneys when there's a lot of evidence that district attorneys are bought off by police unions and are in bed with the police they're supposed to be prosecuting if the police do wrong? You look at the Andrew Brown situation. I'm sorry. If you look at that video, the standard can no longer be simply, was Andrew Brown a threat? What about, was the police a threat to this black man? Explain to me why. They showed up in a truck with military, they look like they're in Fallujah with body visors and automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons. And they jump out. Instead of approaching him, saying we have a subpoena, this and that, they showed up, guns pointed at the man. What about that threat to Andrew Brown? Ronald Green, did you see the video? So what do black people, or any people, but black people in specific, are they not allowed to respond to a threat? Because I'll tell you what, if I was in a car, I don't care if I've sold drugs or whatever. White people sell drugs too. Trust me. If I was in a car and all those cops showed up with guns pointed at me, my fight or flight would probably be in reverse, and that car would reverse, and I'd probably drive away. Especially for a black person who, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're either going to get shot sitting there or get shot driving away. And by the way, there was a police officer. The majority of the shots came from a police officer, not as Andrew Brown was in the immediate driving right away around the police officers, but a police officer behind him as he had already driven away. He was not a threat as he's driving away, but that police officer shot, I think I counted 3 times, and one of them hit him in the back of the neck. So, listen, Joe Biden is Joe Biden. You watch CNN, you watch MSNBC, it's stenography for the police. It's the same script over and over again when there's mass shootings. CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, they don't actually challenge the politicians taking the blood money. They don't actually challenge the corporations to stop doing business with certain institutions that are pro-gun. They cover it for a few days and then they move on. So that normalizes it. It's the same thing with these murders. All right, CNN, they'll cover the Dante Wright protests in saturation. They'll cover the Freddie Gray protests for days and days and days. They'll cover the Andrew Brown protests a little bit. I think we covered it more than CNN. John did good work on the ground in North Carolina. They'll cover this one, in Louisiana. They'll cover the Ronald Green one for a few days. But other than that, they're not gonna question why all these police departments have. They got more weapons than some countries do. Seriously, the police in America have more weaponry than some countries do. Many countries do. They're not going to question, well, why did the police show up? In the case of Andrew Brown, pointing their guns at him as he was in his car. Why? Maybe they could have came with social workers. Maybe they could have came with a different approach. They're certainly not gonna call for, should we look into the governor of Louisiana who saw this video a long time ago of Ronald Greene? Should we maybe disband the police department who just presided over a massive cover-up for 2 years? They certainly didn't ask Rahm Emanuel any questions about covering up the murder of Laquan McDonald in Chicago. Oh, wait. Not only did they not ask him any questions, ABC gave him a nice contributor contract, and now Rahm Emanuel has been appointed, what is he, the ambassador to Japan or some bullshit like that? We'll keep covering it. Unfortunately, we'll probably be back in the field soon covering another black man murdered. But part of why these black men keep getting murdered is the corporate media covers it up. And just now they're finally calling it a cover-up. But this isn't the only cover-up. Ronald Greene is not the only cover-up. Daniel Cameron, the Kentucky Attorney General, was literally caught lying about the grand jury in the Breonna Taylor case. He just lied. He said, oh no, the grand jury agreed with me. Several grand jury members come out. They say, no, we weren't given X, Y, and Z information, and we were only given the opportunity to press these charges. These other things were ruled out. Did the corporate media call it a cover-up? No. Was there ever justice for Breonna Taylor? No. So we'll continue covering it. But it's really, really outrageous. And frankly, I mean, right here, Ronald Greene, cop lies, lies about his body camera footage, that he had body camera footage from there, says that Ronald Greene was fleeing even though he was still shackled. And the thing is, the police department there and probably the politicians there knew they were lying. They knew it was all a lie. And the only reason it's out is not because the police leaked it, somebody else leaked it. So how many more Ronald Greenes are there? Moving on. By the way, as you can see, we are being severely suppressed on YouTube. Severely. We got almost 119,000 subscribers. We're going live, not that we don't love you all, to 300 people. Okay? That doesn't make any sense. There's literally channels, folks, with like, not to poop on them, but there's channels like with, I don't know, 10,000, 12,000 viewers, 12,000 subscribers, like basically getting the same amount of live viewership that we are. So to be clear, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we are working on some things behind the scenes to possibly do some other things outside of YouTube. But for now, please, please, if you've already pressed the like button, great. Share these live streams. Another thing, post on your social media that we're live. It's really pathetic that we have to do this, but creating your own posts on Twitter, on Facebook, Status Coup Live, whatever. We're just being throttled like crazy. We're being throttled like crazy. And it really is fucking outrageous how hard we work. And YouTube is doing this. And now we don't have to speculate because YouTube's CEO has literally said, yeah, we're hiding. I mean, she didn't say hiding, but she basically said, yeah, if you're, not authoritative like CNN and Fox News, it might be harder for you to be visible, i.e. we're hiding you. As Ranter Station says, you could search Status Coup and still get no results. Yeah, Jen sent that an email showing visible. People can't find Status Coup. I wonder why. And it's not just us, by the way. It's not just us. They're doing this to a lot of people. But we've certainly been getting it pretty thick. Pretty thick. So thank you. Keep it coming in the super chat. Please sign up as a member if you can to help us around some of this suppression. It makes a big difference. So want to move on. Colin, if you could show that tweet from Peter Dow to set up this Joe Biden story. So Joe Biden, and I know people say, well, Jordan, you voted for him. You're right. I don't want to do this same song and dance. I voted for him for the reasons I already said. But I had no illusions about who he was, and I had no illusions about what was going to happen. I guess one illusion I had was the fact that I didn't think the progressives, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Ro Khanna, Pramila Jayapal, Mark Pocan, Then you have Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, on and on and on. I didn't think they were just going to, frankly, do nothing and let Biden basically move further and further right and be okay and just go silently into the wind as Biden essentially moved to the right. I mean, he's kind of basically where Obama was, but abandon whatever minuscule campaign promises he made. But that's exactly what's been happening. Biden doesn't surprise me. It's the fact that there is no progressive opposition at all to Biden. The progressive opposition is you and us and Jimmy Dore. That's basically been the brunt of the progressive opposition. And I think Peter Dow kind of puts it well. He puts up a few screen grabs. So the corporate media basically manufactured consent, giving Biden cover to break a series of major campaign promises. Here you have what's the secret of Biden's success, Paul Krugman says. Oh, my God. Joe Biden is electrifying America like FDR. Oh, boy. Can Biden be our FDR? Holy cow. Joe Biden is a transformational president, says David Brooks, as he drinks his Bordeaux for the New York Times. I mean, it's just unseemly at this point. It's just unseemly at this point. The propaganda. I mean, we had Russiagate for many years. We had the Iraq War. Before that, we had the media bending over backwards for Obama. But, I mean, this is kind of absurd. He put forth a $1.9 trillion COVID stimulus bill, had some good things in it. It's all temporary. It doesn't cut child poverty in half. It's a Band-Aid to an economic gunshot wound. We're going to talk about the looming eviction moratorium, by the way, soon. Other than that, he ran on a public option. Joke. Fooled you. $2,000 checks. Sorry about that. Maybe next time. We're not going to do $2,000 checks. Public option, take a hike. What else? I mean, asking for more money for police as we see more and more Ronald Green and Andrew Browns and Dante Wrights. Police need more money. $15 minimum wage. Oh, well, the parliamentarian, blah, 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 blah. Very FDR, let me tell you. Quite FDR. Because, FDR promised Social Security, right? But then he said, well, I can't do it because the Senate parliamentarian ruled no. And FDR, promised a New Deal and a government jobs program and all these things. But then he said, well, I don't know. We don't want to go too bold here. I mean, honestly, it's beyond propaganda at this point. It's just unseemly brainwashing. And the corporate media wants to do this in cycles because they know Biden, let's face it, doesn't look great for 2024. So they just want to rev up this propaganda and then set it up for the woke era of either Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg. That's what they're doing. They're setting it up for either Kamala or Pete Buttigieg. And trying to make really, frankly, less than incremental improvements. I wouldn't even say they're incremental. It's all temporary Band-Aids. They're trying to take that and glorify it as FDR, who literally saved the country from the Great Depression, set up most of our social safety nets. It's a joke. And while I was gone, it comes out. I'm going to the Washington Post story column. It comes out while I was gone. His budget that he's about to reveal, it's going to leave out a few things, as in all the things he promised. Public option for healthcare, not going to be included in this budget. That will be proposed next week. You're beginning to get a theme here, folks. The public option is not going to be in this one. The $15 minimum wage, well, it wasn't going to be in that one. The COVID relief bill, we can't do the $15 minimum wage in that one. We'll do it down the road. Oh, the public option, which, by the way, the public option, we need a lot more than a public option. Public option, not going to be in this one. We'll get to that later. White House officials have left key Biden campaign promises on healthcare out of their coming budget proposal as the administration focuses on trying to pass what is already included, according to 4 people briefed. The White House jettisoned months of planning from agency staff as their initial plan could fuel criticisms that the administration is pushing new spending programs too aggressively. Criticisms from who? The COVID relief bill, even though it was a temporary Band-Aid, was wildly popular. The $15 minimum wage, wildly popular. Medicare for all, wildly popular. Whose criticism are they worried about? Wall Street? Big Pharma? For-profit healthcare? Private hospital equipment? Who is the boogeyman that they're so worried about? Their donors. The Washington Post left that part out, pushing new spending programs too aggressively. The budget will not include President Biden's campaign pledge to enact a public option to create a government-run health insurance program or his pledge to cut prescription drug costs, the People said. The decision to hold back many of Biden's campaign plans from his first budget proposal reflects the challenges facing the administration as it works to prioritize other spending expansions related to the U.S. economy and social welfare programs. Biden has proposed more than $4 trillion in new government spending and trillions of dollars in tax hikes to pay for it. The budget deficit last year, meanwhile, was worth more than $3 trillion. So let me get something straight. Biden, to him, there's greater priorities than at this point, I don't know, probably roughly 40 to 50 million people without health insurance. Over 100 million, I would venture to guess, underinsured. Apparently, infrastructure is a higher priority than that. I'm not saying the roads aren't shit. Don't get me wrong. But I would say healthcare is a much graver priority than infrastructure, in my opinion. Then you have the $15 minimum wage. Nothing about that in this budget. They told us, "Oh no, we can't do it in the first coronavirus bill. We're going to get to it." Not a mention of it. All but disappeared, which is, again, a disaster because even if it passed today, it would take 5 years. 5 years for that to be implemented. So moonwalking on a public option, which was not enough anyway, moonwalking on a $15 minimum wage comes out now. He's also, the next CNBC article, he's also not including any student debt forgiveness. And the debt forgiveness he was giving was a joke. $10,000. This is from CNBC. On the campaign trail, Biden issued his support for $10,000 of undergraduate or graduate student debt relief for every year of the national community service, up to 5 years and $50,000. Since then, House and Senate Democrats repeatedly urged Biden to broadly forgive up to $550,000 of federal debt through executive order. Biden's first 100 days are now behind him, and he has repeatedly pushed back against leaders of his own party, stating that he will only support up to $10,000 of debt forgiveness. Well, on Friday, Washington Post reported that several ambitious Biden campaign pledges will likely be left out of the White House budget, including student debt forgiveness. The Biden administration is reportedly reviewing federal student loan relief programs separately. Again, here's the theme. Here's the theme, folks. We're not going to get to it. We're not going to get to the $15 minimum wage. We're not going to get to the $15 minimum wage in the COVID bill. We'll get to it later. We're not going to get to the public option in this budget. We're going to do it separately. Oh, we're not going to get to the $10,000 student loan forgiveness in this one. We'll get to it later. Well, later, if you know anything about politics, later, I mean, you're already going to start the midterm campaigns, basically 2 months, 3 months. Campaigns for the midterms and coverage for the midterms are generally going to start in late summer, early fall. Republicans aren't going to work with you now, much less then. The Joe Manchins and the Kristen Sinemas, who still control the government, not to mention Biden's buddies, Chris Coons, Tom Carper, and other corporate Democrats, you think they're going to cooperate more closer to the midterms? So all of this is just empty bullshit. Platitudes, call it whatever you want. All of this, he's not going to do any of it because he doesn't believe in any of it. And it wasn't exposed that his record wasn't exposed during the campaign because the corporate media literally lifted up a half-conscious man and pretended that he was a lunch bucket union man guy when in reality, he's never actively pushed for a $15 minimum wage. He never actively pushed for anything on healthcare, really. He pushed to militarize the police. He pushed for more prisons. He pushed for more war. But his record never matched any of the progressive rhetoric, just like Hillary Clinton's didn't. And now what you have is essentially him saying, we'll get to all of this later, as in never. Healthcare is a crisis in this country. Even the jobs that have come back, restaurant industry, bars, hotels, overwhelming majority of them don't have healthcare or have very shitty healthcare. Yet he's telling you the one thing he ran on, why he said, to Bernie, well, how are you going to pay for it? Public option is much cheaper. He said, no, it's not just that I'm anti-Medicare for all. I'm for this better option, which is a public option, which he's abandoning. I promise you, folks, maybe it's because I'm well rested. He's not going to do a public option. He's not. He's not going to fight for a $15 minimum wage. Student loan relief. I'm going to show you this interview he did with the New York Times. He said he's pretty much thinks it's wrong. You racked up the bill. It's on you, he thinks. That's what he thinks. It's really outrageous. And the more outrageous part, and corporate media, that's why we created Status Coup, because the corporate media covers up. We cover what the corporate media covers up. It's not just a slogan, it's reality. Jen was just out covering protests against Amazon. Jen's out covering the protests on behalf of Palestinians. They're not. They're certainly not. But I want to show you this revolting, if you can go to the New York Times interview, Colin, with, David Brooks. I mean, goodness gracious, this was really a big fucking verbal diarrhea. But this interview is very illuminating, very illuminating. So I want to go first to this part. This was while I was gone. So David Brooks interviews Biden. And this first part, this may seem like an unusual way to answer a question about the role of government, but it is quintessential Biden. Some people get their worldviews from ideological constructs or philosophical movements like conservatism or progressivism. Biden derives his worldview from lived experience, especially the world of his youth and how his parents taught him to see that world. It created the moral underpinnings of the big legislative packages he is proposing. The story about his father includes the key elements of Biden worldview. Oh, God. First, a social location. What matters is not only how a person sees an issue, but also where he or she sees it from. Biden sees most issues from the vantage of the folks that used to be called the common man, the lower middle class, and the middle class Truman Democrats he grew up. Okay. Let's first, Joe Biden's common man is bankers. It always has been. Joe Biden's common man is real estate developers. Joe Biden's common man, is big pharma, big healthcare, Silicon Valley, military industrial complex, and all the financial lawyers. That's the common man to Joe Biden. Oh, on the campaign trail. Oh, my dad said, there's dignity in a paycheck and all this bullshit. This is preeminent gaslighting. Joe Biden is kind of like that jock in high school who says rancid things about, all the girls he's, poo-pooing behind the locker room, in the locker room, what Trump called locker room talk, but then goes out and, speaks very softly and is very, charismatic and everybody thinks he's a sweetheart. But behind closed doors, he's a sieve. Joe Biden is a fraud and he's full of shit. And propaganda from David Brooks is why a lot of people, particularly the older voters that put him in the White House, think that this guy is like a union man, think that this guy is like, for the common man. What common man? The common man right now, and woman, is struggling for health care. The common man and woman, especially if you're younger, has, if you're lucky, less than 100,000 in student loan debt. Most people more. The common man is either facing eviction or got themselves in debt during the pandemic to pay their rent, and now might be caught up on their rent, but incurred debt to pay for that rent because, in that case, Trump, but even more now, Joe Biden. It's all temporary band-aids. Oh, eviction moratoriums, foreclosure moratoriums. Well, when the pandemic is over, and it looks like they're seeming to declare it over now, what's going to happen to all those people? Does Joe Biden not consider those people the common man? No, it's the banks that want to get paid on all the residential buildings they own or they're invested in. That's the common man to Joe Biden. I mean, it's just obscene and heinous the way this is framed. Let me read a little bit more of it. Second, an acute awareness of the vicissitude of life. Biden said that his dad once showed him an image of the comic strip Viking, Hager the Horrible, getting hammered by life and screaming out, "Why me? God answers, why not?" Biden still has that comic strip. That was my dad. Third, an intense focus on human dignity. Oh, human dignity, yes. I think the Irish most often use the word dignity of any other group of people, Biden said. I think it's because when you've been deprived of dignity, you put a high premium on it. In the white ethnic hierarchies of mid-century America, quote, to be Irish was to be second class. Biden recalls, the English owned the town. Well, let me get this straight on dignity. On dignity, he says. Let me read a little bit more. Out of these three elements emerges a governing philosophy and subsequently a set of policies that work strenuously to support people amid the setbacks of life, that offers people good jobs so they could live with dignity, that pushes against the arrogance of wealth. He's certainly pushing against the arrogance of wealth by making them more wealthy. Another piece of his basic worldview comes from 20th century Catholic social teaching. He said that his father loved the French Catholic philosopher Jacques Maritain, and later in the conversation mentioned that he too was guided by, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Maritain. So let me move on. Hold on. Here we go. Colin, I'm moving down. So this is the part that I found most egregious. In this context, Biden sees the greatest risks in incrementalism. In this context, Biden sees the greatest risk in incrementalism. Quote, the risk is not trying to go big, Biden said. If we stay small, I don't know how we change our international status and competitive capacity. Let me repeat that. Quote, the risk is not trying to go big, Biden said. If we stay small, I don't know how we change our international status and competitive capacity. Well, where is the big? Am I missing the big? Where is these big, bold policies, not the bullshit David Brooks is spewing? $15 minimum wage is the middle ground, frankly, conservative position. We should have a $25 minimum wage. He's not even doing a $15 minimum wage. Is he going big? The COVID relief bill, $1.9 trillion, economic band-aid for a gaping gunshot wound. Student loan debt, $10,000. I think the average student loan debt is like close to $50,000. And now he's not even doing it. He's waiting to be told if it's legal. Are you kidding me? Public option, which was not good enough. Moonwalking. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. And the media is not going to hold him accountable. We knew that. Hold on one second. We know the media is not going to hold him accountable. But the really outrageous thing to me, and I got to tell you, say what you want about Jimmy Dore. I'm a friend of his. A lot of people have, called him the enemy, all this stuff. He's been right. He's been right. So have other people, but Jimmy's been right. At a certain point, there is no excuse and there is no strategy for the progressives that we elected and we volunteered for, and I didn't, but you donated to, basically turning the other cheek to all of this empty neoliberal bullshit. What they said was, yeah, he's not our cup of tea. He's not our cup of tea, but we're going to fight, get him in there, and we fight on day one. Well, it's long past day one. Long past day one. Bernie, not doing anything. Sorry. He's allowing this to go on. He's not challenging any of it. He's not calling out Biden. AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Ro Khanna, Pramila Jayapal, Mark Pocan, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman. Frankly, a lot of them seem more focused on woke issues. They seem a lot more interested on woke issues than economic issues. I care about some of the woke issues, but I mean, this is absurd. This is Mitt Romney level flip-floppery. Say what you want about Trump. He kept his promises. They were awful, but he kept them, or tried to keep a lot of them. And there's no pushback. I get it. Pandemic, what's going on in Israel and Palestine, mass shootings, Andrew Brown, Ronald Green, Dante Wright. It's one thing after the other. Trust me. Whenever we try to plan things to cover, it's difficult when it's one fire after another fire after another fire. But this man ran on Building Back Better. He ran on Medicare for All is radical, but I still want to do something, a public option. He ran on $2,000 checks out the door. He ran on $15 minimum wage, end of story. And none of that is coming to fruition. He's not even trying for more of it. Yet the media is telling you this is FDR? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I want to move on to the next looming thing, which the media is not talking about. Biden's certainly not talking about it. We're going to talk about it. We would like, for those of you that came in late, we'd like to do a reporting tour on this. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But at the end of June, the eviction moratorium is up. And I got news for you folks. I don't think they're going to extend it. I think they're starting to try, the pandemic is winding down. The pandemic is over, whatever that means. Granted, obviously cases are way down, which is a good thing. Let's not forget all the people that have died. Let's not forget all the people with long haul COVID, including Jen, who's been suffering. But thank God the cases are down. So the cases are down. So Biden wants to do a victory lap. And just like Obama allowed all these people to be foreclosed on in 2009, 2010, and the media didn't blink an eye, Democratic Party said, too bad. Let's do Dodd-Frank, which is another Band-Aid to a gunshot wound, and let all you people be foreclosed on, mostly Black and Latino people, by the way. There's an eviction moratorium coming up at the end of June. There's been a patchwork of rental relief that's been put in there. And before I get to the details of the eviction moratorium, I want to take you through what Biden said. Colin, if you could bring up that part from that Vanity Fair article. So Biden was interviewed. I think this was, during the campaign. He was interviewed by Vanity Fair, and the interviewer from Vanity Fair said, I interviewed the mayor of Seattle a couple of weeks ago, Jenny Durkin. She's a supporter of yours. Another neoliberal hack. I got to interview Shama Sawant soon. I asked her about rent relief, and she said basically the federal government should be in charge of helping people who've lost their jobs, make their rent payments, make their mortgage payments. Is it possible to do some kind of federal rent bailout? Joe Biden, you ready? This is what Joe Biden had to say. Biden said, absolutely, there is, and we should. And we should also deal with housing overall. For example, we're in a position now where we have first-time homebuyers. When they get through this, I provide a $15,000 tax credit for first-time homebuyers. They don't have enough money to be able to get the down payment to get started. Nobody should be paying more than 30% of their income for rent. There should be rent forgiveness and there should be mortgage forgiveness now in the middle of this crisis. Forgiveness, not paid later, forgiveness. It's critically important to people who are in the lower income strata. Let me repeat that. Let me repeat that for those of you in the back. Forgiveness, not paid later, forgiveness. It's critically important to people who are in the lower income strata. So that was, let me get it for you. This was May 2020, when he was trying to get, well, he was pretty much had the Democratic nomination wrapped up there. Actually, no, Bernie had dropped out. So he was basically the Democratic nominee at that point, and again, was lying to people. People saying to run for office, don't get me started. Don't get me started. I actually think I could be more effective as a journalist, but if I actually thought I could be effective as a politician, I just might. I just might. But he said right there, the media will never show you that. He said, forgive the rent, as in the government should pay the rent. Not this patchwork rental relief bullshit, which, by the way, all these rental relief programs are a bureaucratic nightmare where, I'm going to read to you, a lot of these states that have gotten money from the federal government have not distributed the money to renters behind. And now we're facing an eviction moratorium expiring in a few weeks. They're not talking about extending it. And honestly, I wouldn't be for them extending it because that's not the answer. Eventually, the music's going to stop and these people are going to owe the money. And by the way, it's not just the people that have already, maybe you have paid your rent and you're not behind, but to do that, you had to max out your credit card or go in debt elsewhere to pay your rent during this pandemic. What about all the people that might technically not be behind, but are screwed because they're in debt other places? Isn't that the common man Joe Biden talked about in that interview with propagandist David Brooks? Colin, if you have that clip, I want to play it. So we've showed Biden. We've showed Biden said he was for rent forgiveness in May, right? May 2020. Let's show you what he said in the beginning of his presidency in February when he did a town hall with CNN, which was a slobbering, pathetic softball affair. If you have that clip, Colin, it's Biden talking about what we need to do for the people struggling to pay rent.
We promised, look at all the people who are on the verge of being kicked out of their apartments because they cannot afford the rent. What happens when that happens? Everything. Look at all the mom and pop landlords that are in real trouble if we don't subsidize this in the meantime. Look at all the people who are on the verge of missing, and how many people have missed their last 2 mortgage payments and are able to be foreclosed. And that's why I took executive action to say they cannot be foreclosed on in the meantime. Because look at what the impact on the economy would be. You think it's bad now, let all that happen. Landlords that are in real trouble if we don't subsidize this in the meantime. Look at all the people who are on the verge of missing, and how many people have missed their last 2 mortgage payments and are able to be foreclosed. And that's why I took executive action to say they cannot be foreclosed. Let all that happen.
So let me get this straight. Let me get this straight. In the meantime, look at what the effect would be on the economy. Not look at what the effect would be on these people that are going to be evicted. What would be the effect on the economy? See that? That's the capitalist mindset there. What would be the effect on the market? What would be the effect on the economy? But he said, that's why I've taken executive action to not foreclose on people in the meantime. Well, what happened from May 2020 to February 2021? What happened? He said when he was running, forgiveness, not paid later. Forgiveness, not paid later. But he gets into office. Well, in the meantime, I'll protect you. But when the pandemic's over, well, you're on your own. Common man. But the media doesn't cover any of this. The media doesn't challenge him. He said forgiveness. He says, I'm for the common man. He says this is a pandemic that was brought on by nobody. Well, there's a lot of people that are going to be thrown out into the streets. It's already happening in the Bronx, in New York City. I just emailed a tenants group today to try to get interviews. Is Joe Biden worried about those people? Is the Democratic Party worried about those people? What are those people supposed to do? It's not enough to give temporary Band-Aids. These people didn't create this pandemic. A lot of these people have been trying to get back to work. But in America, Joe Biden is more worried about the economy and the market than actual human beings. The human dignity he talked about, he didn't give a damn about human dignity because these people are literally facing an eclipse right now. I want to read from this article, Colin, from Vox. The title, "What Happened to the $45 billion in Rent Relief?" So $45 billion was supposed to be going to tenants to pay their rent during this pandemic. Rent relief was the solution to a possible wave of evictions. It ran headfirst into reality, Vox says. So everyone agreed that rent relief was the only way to stop a wave of millions of Americans from being evicted. The logic was simple: give people who were struggling during the pandemic the money to pay their rent, and landlords would have no reason to evict for non-payment. That simplicity and that remarkable unity from the landlord lobby and tenant advocates alike in calling for this type of relief led Congress to allocate $25 billion in rental assistance in December. Less than 3 months later, in March, they allocated another $21 billion. But despite this unprecedented level of federal aid, people, did I lose it? Hold on. People like Emil Ashby are still in a crisis. Quote, "I'm terrified. I'm so terrified to spend money. The 31-year-old Floridian told me as she shopped Walmart for household supplies, I literally donated eggs to make rent. I'm selling off body parts." This woman's donating her eggs to make rent. I thought Joe Biden cares about dignity. "I'm selling off body parts." Ashbis, who says she works 11 to 12-hour shifts without a break at a Texas roadhouse to afford her $1,300 a month rent, didn't even know she could apply for rent relief. Technically, she couldn't until the week before last, when the state opened up its rent relief application process, the Tampa Bay Times reports. Meanwhile, Miami-Dade County, where she resides, has already closed its program for applications. The disconnect between Ashby's situation and the federal relief that was supposed to help renters like her explains why people are sounding the alarm about a potential deluge of eviction if the federal moratorium is allowed to expire or is struck down in the next few weeks. Getting money into the hands of renters has been exceedingly complicated. No shit. It's meant to be complicated, just like the unemployment insurance program is. The National Low Income Housing Coalition has found over 340 different programs attempting to administer the federal aid. Some programs require onerous documentations. Others make it easy for landlords to apply, and most put the onus others don't make it easy for landlords to apply, and most put the onus on tenants to provide extensive proof of need. And Ashbis is far from unique. Many advocates Vox spoke with said tenants often don't even know the aid is available to them. All of this underscores the difficulty of aiding those at higher risk. I'm going to skip over, Colin. Let me find the part I want to find. Okay, I'm going down to the part, Georgia's Department of Community Affairs, if you find that part, Colin. So Georgia's Department of Community Affairs told me that it has distributed more than $4 million in rental assistance funding to landlords and tenants. The state has received over $552 million for that purpose. Let me repeat. Georgia's Department of Community Affairs told me that it has distributed more than $4 million in rental assistance funding to landlords and tenants, but the state has received over $552 million. Where's the rest of? Where's the $548 million? Where's the rest of it? $4 million? They're sitting on $552 million? Delaware State Housing Authority told me it has distributed $40,000 in rental assistance, 0.02% of its allocated funds. Idaho's Housing and Finance Association told me it has distributed $6.1 million of the $175 million it received from the federal government. Colorado's dashboard shows $2.8 million has been approved from the $247 million it has received. Arizona's dashboard shows $4.38 million has been dispersed out of the $289 million it has received. By the way, just so you know, this is a broader story than just this, because a lot of people, we've been covering Flint for many, many years. Thank you for the super chat. Keep them coming. Presents, $10. The system will not respond to anything less than high pressure. What do you think is the most viable large-scale action? I'll get to that in a bit. Thanks for the super chat. Keep those super chats coming. If I missed any, I'll read them at the end. So this whole idea that, the federal government gave Flint $180 million or something like that. Go ask the people of Flint, Michigan, how much of the money earmarked for them actually went to the residents of Flint, Michigan and water relief. It's the same story in other programs where Congress allocates certain funds, but they go through the state governments, and those state governments, it's just very interesting. They 8 out of 10 times kind of get siphoned off to other goodie bags and other little pet projects rather than where they're supposed to be going, with no audit and no oversight of where the money goes. I mean, I just read to you, you got 0.02% of the money being spent in Delaware that was sent to them. Colorado, 4 million has, no, not Colorado, Georgia, 4 million has been spent of the 552 million. Where is this money going? And by the way, even if they were trying to spend the money, how are people supposed to know? It doesn't seem like there's clear communication that you could apply. It seems that you have to show your blood type. If you know you have to apply, you have to show your blood type and 7 different forms of identification and ridiculous things. It's outrageous. There was a pandemic that came, which we're now starting to hear more and more information that it might have came from a lab, which the corporate media also said was a conspiracy. That came out that there were sick officials in the Wuhan lab that went to the hospital in October 2019. So where's this money going? And I don't know if Joe Biden wasn't bought off by real estate developers and banks who are heavily invested in commercial real estate, and banks that make money from people paying their rent, not to mention banks that own a lot of these homes that are going to be foreclosed on. Don't you think he might have just said, hey, maybe it's just simpler if we work with the landlords to pay the rent directly? You know, kind of how Europe has been paying, backstopping the payrolls of businesses, just kind of a single payer relationship there. Wouldn't that be simpler than sending relief money to 700 groups that have 700 standards for how you get the money? And oh, by the way, nobody even knows if they could get it or if it's available. It's almost like they're creating this big bureaucratic mess so that people do get evicted. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Because there's really a simple solution that's been there all this time for the government to directly pay rent for tenants. The landlords need their rent paid too. They're not all Goldman Sachs. There's just average landlords that took out loans that need to pay the banks back too. So it's not, they're not all terrible. But Biden is forgetting the common man here, because he said, we'll cover it in the meantime. Well, the meantime is coming to an end because they're declaring the pandemic is over. And there's a shit ton of people up Schitt's Creek. So we would like to cover it. Colin, if you could show that graphic you made. I'd love to do, if you remember, during coronavirus, we did kind of a COVID depression tour where we went around the country. We interviewed people facing eviction. We interviewed people who have lost their jobs, who have lost their health care, lost their purpose. While we were on the road, we covered, police brutality. We interviewed Breonna Taylor's aunt. I'd like to do another tour like that, focusing on people facing evictions, focusing on people that have fallen far, far behind on their rent, focusing on people that have had to bury themselves in debt to pay their rent. I'd like to focus on people that maybe had a decent job before, but now because of the pandemic are working, multiple jobs or 3 jobs. I'd like to focus on your economic rot. Take that and put it in your pipe. Because the media is not going to show it. The media is doing the same old, same old. The media is doing the same old story, which is, well, unemployment's going down, GDP's going up, everything's dandy, stock market's rising. That's true. Philip says, $2, thank you. Europe has more functional organized labor. That is correct. That is correct. So we'll stay on it. It's coming. It's at the end of June that this eviction moratorium ends. And honestly, even though it's a moratorium, already, landlords have been trying to evict people already. And as the Daily Poster, David Sirota's media outlet, pointed out, now the Koch I guess, Koch brother, singular, the Koch brother is now investing heavy duty into real estate because he wants to capitalize. Because when these homes get foreclosed on, when these apartment tenants get kicked out, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to tear down those homes. They might tear down some apartment complexes, and they're going to build more luxury condos, gentrified shopping centers with a Whole Foods. And the Koch brother, Charles Koch, is it? I don't remember which one died, is now buying up properties at a lower price, just waiting to cash in. And I do think, actually, with the pandemic over, with more and more people vaccinated, as you saw those protests after George Floyd's murder, the cross-generational millions of people protesting all over the country, I don't know about a general strike. I wish, but I think you might have a chance of economic protests this summer because things are going to get really bad, and the media is just basically covering that up, for sure. Moving on, and keep smashing that. Well, look at that dashboard, will you? We got 315 people watching. 420 people have pressed the like button. Isn't that interesting? There's a few options. Either YouTube isn't accurately showing how many people are watching, which is an option, or they're throttling the hell out of our channel because you can't have 300 people. We never got up to 400 viewers. So how do you have 400 something people that press the like button, but only 315 viewers? It's all very interesting. It's all very interesting. And by the way, we are live on Twitch. We are live on Twitter, and we are live on Rockfin. So we're spreading it out. We're trying to go live in many different places. Definitely get on our text list if you're not, so you know when Jen's live. I'll be going back in the field soon. So you could text 370-370, type in COUP. Text COUP to 370-370 to get on our text list. So I want to move on. Obviously, I was gone, and while I was on my honeymoon, war broke out in Israel and Palestine. I'm not going to go through every single day and every single situation, every single thing, because it was basically 3 weeks, so I can't do a whole recap on it. But I want to touch on a few things. First of all, I'll just be completely open because I just keep it real. I come from a super Jewish family. I mean, not really like a religious Jewish family. My dad is, I have been open about it, is super Zionistic, thinks Israel could do no wrong, thinks God gave us the land. I love my dad. We don't really talk about it much because there's no point, in my view, to talk about it. I'm not going to change his mind. He's not going to change my mind. My brother served in the Israeli army, which I've said before. I wouldn't have done it, but both of my brothers went to a private Jewish school. I didn't. And my older brother, became very passionate about Israel and went to serve there. And, I've heard people say he's a murderer, this, that, and the other thing. Oh, I don't agree with that. I love my brother. I love my dad. I just don't agree with them on these issues. I don't also agree on every single thing out there from progressives on it. I see it a little bit more nuanced than most. I might, if I'm not woke enough or, hardcore enough for people, then so be it. But my parents' generation, and not just my parents' generations, but a lot of Jewish Americans in my parents' generation came up not actually knowing the full story of what happened in Israel with Palestinian displacement. And for Jews, there was a lot of brainwashing, frankly. So if you know the history, I mean, the United Nations partitioned the British Mandate of Palestine in 1948 and gave Israel a certain line of land and gave Palestine, what it would be called, a certain line of land. Israel and the Arabs fought, and Israel took more land than the United Nations and the other countries had partitioned for them. So from the beginning, yeah, technically you could say, well, they won the war, so they should get the land. Okay, but still, I mean, millions of Palestinians have been displaced, and Israel went way beyond the land that the United Nations had allotted for them. That's just the facts. So from the beginning, Israel took more land that was partitioned for them. I happen to believe Israel should exist, and the Jewish people do deserve their own state and their own country. But you could think that, I mean, I'm Jewish, so I believe that, without putting your head in the sand, that from the beginning of Israel, they took more land which is colonialism, they took more land than was allotted to them. Then you obviously had the 1967 war where Israel, I mean, there were a lot of Arab countries around Israel, Jordan, Syria, this and that planned to attack Israel, that never wanted Israel to exist in the first place. But after Israel won that war, they have been occupying Gaza, the West Bank, and other areas for a long time. With that said, I think some progressives, I don't think you should just gloss over Hamas. I don't think you could just gloss over Hamas is a corrupt organization. I mean, that's just factual. Hamas has siphoned off money that has been meant for Palestinian aid, Palestinian relief, and spent it on, rockets and things like that, knowing the money that Israel gets from the United States and knowing that Israel has the military weaponry to defend itself. So Hamas, as the governing body of the West Gaza, has not done the Palestinians any favor. That's also real talk. And although I'm totally against the settlers and the settling, Jews going in and displacing Arabs in the West Bank, in Gaza, in other areas, I wouldn't condone like Black Lives Matter firing rockets into white towns either. So I don't think it should be glossed over. Israel is initiating a lot of this, but the response should not be rockets into Israeli towns, in my opinion. And secondly, if you want to blame Israeli citizens that are living in Israel and saying they're occupying, then you need to see, where are you standing? Where are you sitting? Because you're all on occupied land. So am I. This is the way of the world. This is the reality. Okay? America is an occupied country. We stole it from the Native Americans. So the reality is the Israeli citizens don't deserve rockets being fired at them, just like the Palestinians shouldn't be displaced in Gaza, just like the Palestinians should have access to clean water and schools and healthcare and an economy. So I think that what's being lost in a lot of this is Israel has been doing wrong. I mean, it's just a fact. They have been occupying Gaza. They have been occupying the West Bank and other places. But if you look back to 2006, 2005, 2006, Israel left Gaza. Hamas started shooting rockets. This is also the truth. So, I think a lot of people look at the heinous videos. I mean, you see children getting killed in Gaza. You see people getting shot at for throwing stones. The IDF is very similar to the police in America. The IDF also lies. My family won't be happy with me saying that, but Benjamin Netanyahu is a right-wing extremist. He is, to me, Dick Cheney with a Jewish star on. Okay? So I'm not condemning the Jewish people that live in Israel any more than I'm condemning you who lives on occupied land in America. But I am condemning the Israeli government. I am condemning Benjamin Netanyahu. The settlements and the illegal settlers need to stop. And the United States has kind of wink and a nod. The United States has kind of wink and a nod, and Obama said no to the settlements, but then continued showering Israel with money. Well, if they are illegally expanding on occupied territory that the international community says is occupied, then why are you giving them all this money? I mean, that's the reality. Again, my parents won't be happy with me saying that, but I have to just speak the truth and based on the facts. Secondly, I mean, Colin, if you could show this, I mean, this isn't really my opinion. This is a tweet, but you even have IDF soldiers. You even have IDF soldiers saying that all their attacks are not purely defensive, and some of it is a lot of it is just indiscriminately bombing as much shit as you can, and If people die, people die. This is the tweet, Colin, from Colin Kalmbacher. Breaking, IDF fighter pilot admits to war crimes in Gaza. Quote, bringing down the towers became our way to vent the frustration of what was happening to us and the success of the factions in Gaza. We did not succeed in stopping the launching of the rockets, so we dropped the towers. This was from Major D, who was interviewed on Israel's Channel 12. Israel, I think, has like 2 news channels. That's one of them. His full statement. Hold on. His full statement. We threw tons of ammunition and fire on them that no one doubts. I would to go out to launch a raid with the feeling that bringing down the towers became our way to vent the frustration of what is happening to us and the success of the factions in Gaza to continue kicking us. We did not succeed in stopping the launching of rockets. We did not succeed in affecting the leadership of the terrorist organizations, so we dropped the towers. So he's right there telling you it wasn't defensive. They were just pissed off. So they carpet bombed a couple residential buildings. This goes hand in hand with the IDF lying about Hamas being in the Associated Press building. Here's the other article, Colin. Owner of the AP tower destroyed an Israeli airstrike in Gaza says he saw no evidence of Hamas in the building. The owner of the Associated Press building in Gaza City that was destroyed by an Israeli airstrike on May 15 told Insider he never saw evidence inside the building of any presence of Hamas, the Palestinian organization the Israeli government said it was targeting. His account dovetails with that of the AP, which told Insider there was no indication of a Hamas presence in the building before the 12-floor tower was reduced to rubble during the recent conflict between Israel and Hamas fighters in Gaza. This goes separately. The Israeli ambassador to the UN told Israeli radio that he believed the AP was, quote, not aware of the existence of Hamas in the building. Okay. I mean, I always tell you, don't breathlessly believe what the U.S. government tells you. However, in this case, you got the Secretary of State saying, Anthony Blinken, this is the other article, Colin. Blinken hasn't seen any evidence on AP Gaza building strike. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said he hasn't yet seen any evidence supporting Israel's claim that Hamas operated in a Gaza building housing the Associated Press and other media outlets that were destroyed by an Israeli airstrike. So, you know, at the end of the day, you have a right-wing extremist in Benjamin Netanyahu. Again, I actually do believe if rockets are being fired at you, you have the right to defend yourself. It is about proportions. It is how you defend yourself. You know, I was talking to my mom and my brother, and they said, well, what would you like them to do? I don't know, but Israel has some of the best technology in the world, courtesy of American dollars, right? Israel has some of the best technology. Israel has some of the best surveillance. I'm assuming if there's rockets all over Hamas, which there are rockets throughout, throughout Gaza, I'm assuming Israel could identify them before those rockets fire and find other counterintelligence ways to take them out without carpet bombing Gaza and murdering hundreds and hundreds of people. Over the last decade, you're talking tens of thousands of people have died. So what you have here is, we call this status coup. You have a status quo. And America has been behind that status quo forever. So to me, there's people who will say, well, Israel is occupying West Bank and Gaza, no doubt about it. Others will say Israel is occupying, all of Palestine and they should leave. Well, you could go back to 1948 if you want. I mean, blame the UN. I say, don't blame the Jewish people, just like you are standing on occupied land. But at the end of the day, I remember I was in Israel a couple years ago. There is a generational divide as well in Israel, because a lot of people in my generation, the younger millennials, whatever, want the Palestinians to have their own country, want to stop the occupation, want to live in peace, want Palestinians to have more resources, education, healthcare, stronger electricity, what have you. But their right-wing leaders won't allow it. And if you recall, if you know far back, if you know, if you go far enough back in the 90s, Israel and Rabin and the Palestinians had agreed to give Palestine their own country, and he was assassinated, and there was opposition on the Palestinian side. So, bottom line, I'm just going to tell you my honest opinion, based on what I know. It might not be as woke as some, but I also think glossing over and just pretending it doesn't exist, rockets being fired into Israel, I'm not going to do that. I think they have a right to defend themselves, but we also have to address what is happening before the rockets, which is occupation, which is displacement, which is forced evictions, which is the Israeli army storming this mosque. So Israel is provoking the Palestinians. There is no doubt about it. You know, my parents' generation don't want to hear it, but that's the truth. We're talking about evictions here in America. The Palestinians have been evicted now for the last 75, 80 years. They're occupied in Gaza. It is 2 million people packed like sardines. So Netanyahu knows what he's doing. But to me, two wrongs don't make a right. We need to say, well, Hamas shouldn't be firing rockets. Israel should not be carpet bombing Gaza. And the international community and America need to step in to stop the occupation, to provide actual relief to the Palestinians, to actually restart a peace process so that there can be two states, because I do believe in a two-state solution. But I can't personally. I think you could do two things at once. I think I wasn't paying that much attention because I was trying to enjoy my honeymoon. But I do believe that you should be outraged at what's going on in Gaza. You should be outraged at massacre of Palestinian people. You should be outraged, not just the deaths, but the terror, the forced evictions. Jen, I don't have it loaded, sent me a video of them arresting a 10-year-old Palestinian child, the IDF. Storming the mosques. You know, protesters throw stones, being shot at. Paramedics being shot at. It's outrageous, and it's Israel doing it. I have no problem saying that. Israel should leave Gaza. Israel should leave the West Bank. Part of that American money going to Israel should go to the Palestinians. But there also needs to be attention and actual effort made to stop, if those things were to happen, which is a big if. It's not okay that Hamas, which, yes, you're right, Israel did create Hamas. That's true. It's basically similar to America creating Al-Qaeda. We funded the Mujahideen. I always botch it. We funded the Mujahideen. Sorry, can't say it. And that created Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. Also, we could, stop the Soviets from invading Afghanistan. Well, Israel both funded and turned a blind eye to Islamic groups that eventually became Hamas. That's the truth, too. So there's a lot of truths here, and I think a lot of people see it black or white and don't like people who add any nuance. And frankly, I see, unfortunately, a lot of anti-Semitism going around in this country now, with Jewish people being attacked, just like Palestinians have been attacked. And I don't think that's the answer either. Don't become what you're fighting against. For those that are attacking Jewish people in New York City and DC and other places, if you're trying to stamp out hate, doing it with hate is not, it's just going to create more hate. Mujahideen. Thank you. Jewish people in America did not create this problem. The Israeli citizens living in Israel did not create this problem. Okay? Extremists have created this problem. Israel and the Israeli government basically took more than was allotted for them and then occupied after the 1967 war. And that has been allowed for decades. And the United States is also at fault for allowing Israel's aggression for years and years and years. La chance. How could you have a two-state solution? Well, I think one of the main problems is the leadership in Israel. You can't have a two-state solution if you have extremist right-wingers leading the government. You also can't have a two-state solution if your negotiating partner is Hamas, who doesn't want you to exist. Not so long ago, about 30 years ago, but in terms of Israel-Palestine, not too long ago, there was the chance for peace. There was the chance for a two-state solution. You had the Oslo Accords. You had Rabin basically was offering huge chunks of land to the Palestinians, including parts of Jerusalem, which is the most contested part. And for that, he was assassinated by extremist Jewish people in Israel. And Hamas fought it on the Palestinian side. So it might not look that way now, but if we had leadership on the Israeli side, which we don't, if we had partners at one point, the PLO wanted to negotiate with Israel, which Hamas did not like. So to me, in the immediate, there needs to be pressure for Israel to move out of Gaza, for Israel to move out of West Bank completely. But with them moving out, there actually needs to be controls so Hamas stops firing rockets. There needs to be, if we are able to get Israel out of the West Bank and Gaza, actual investment for the Palestinians. They can't just create their own stock market. They can't just create their own economy. There needs to be relief for a territory that's been occupied. But for that, there needs to be strings attached to stop the rockets and all this. And America, which I don't expect from Joe Biden, needs to stop, to put pressure on Israel to stop the illegal settlement expansion. In the West Bank, in Gaza, in other parts, it's illegal. It's not your land. So that's what I think. You know, you might not agree with everything I say. I was perfectly open about the family I come from. I don't agree with them on, 75% of it. But some of it, I do agree. Some of it, I do agree. And I don't like that too many people are glossing over a corrupt group. Hamas is corrupt. They steal funds that are meant to go towards Palestinian relief, schools, healthcare, education, water, and they spend it on rockets and weaponry. Rockets that they know are only, it doesn't condone the carpet bombing that Israel has done in Gaza, not just this time, but years ago too. But they're taking the money that's meant towards actual life and growth in Gaza, and they're spending it on rockets. So that's what I think. I think Jen has done a great job covering it. It's a touchy, I don't want to say it's a touchy subject for me, but it's touchy in terms of it's something I don't completely agree with. Some of the other progressives, I agree with a lot of it, but some of it I don't. And I think we've gotten to this place in progressive media and progressive politics that if you're not 100% lockstep on everything, you're a sellout or you're an imperialist or you're a colonialist or whatever. Hamas is corrupt because Israel created them. Yeah, I said Israel is largely Israel did create Hamas, but they're corrupt, whoever created them or not. And Israel, by the way, wrongly thought that putting their lot behind Hamas, they thought the PLO and Arafat's group was more dangerous, so they turned a blind eye to Hamas. So that's the thing. I think that this is only going to get worse and worse and worse if people just look at it with laser blinders and basically say, to hell with the Jewish people in America, we're going to target them, or on the other side, to hell with the Palestinians. The only true way anything will change is if there is pressure on Biden, pressure on America, actual pressure to stop funding this. I mean, I think Israel has a right to exist. I don't agree with people who are saying, one state solution. whether you like it or not, like Israel was partitioned. The Jewish people were partitioned by the United Nations for land. It's just that the Jews took more land than they were actually allotted. I do believe Palestinians deserve their own country just like Jews do. And I do believe huge parts of Israel should be given back to Palestinians with, call it what you want, reparations, so that they have a place to start from. I do believe that, frankly, Israel should get the hell out of Gaza and West Bank. But I also think Hamas is a major problem, because if you're going to get out of a place like Israel did, Israel removed itself from Gaza in 2006. If you're going to leave greenhouses, which they did, but the group is then going to start firing rockets at you again, well, I don't know what you do in that situation. But I don't think the answer is carpet bombing the most densely populated place on earth. It's not. And Netanyahu has blood on his hands. So does Israel. So that's my take. Obviously, there's a ceasefire now, but we'll continue covering stuff as it develops. Sorry if folks don't think I'm woke enough on the topic, but that's my honest opinion. I'm never going to force an opinion or lie about my opinion just to satisfy the progressive masses. You don't have to agree with me on everything, but Palestine has a right to defend itself. Right. I agree with that, but there's a difference between defending yourself and literally firing rockets into communities that have nothing to do with you. The settlements and things like that, I completely agree, they're wrong. But Hamas isn't firing rockets over those settlements. They've been firing rockets long before for a lot of reasons having nothing to do with settlements. And just like Israel shouldn't be carpet bombing Gaza, I say Israel does have a right to defend itself. Well, Hamas, you could say the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves, but you're not actually solving anything by firing rockets into innocent villages to try and kill as many people as you can. You're basically making the problem worse. So you could say the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. I think they do too. But when the people defending you are a corrupt group that are literally diverting the funds meant towards helping you to fire rockets, well, I think there's problems there. And I don't think, for those of you supporting Hamas or supporting the rockets, then I don't know what to tell you. You don't have to watch me. But I'm never going to say it's okay. I wouldn't say it's right for Black Lives Matter to fire rockets into, Beverly Hills or places, police live or where Trump lives. I just don't agree with that. So that's the deal. It's good to be back. As a reminder, we grow through you. We got one new member so far while I was live. Welcome, Laura. Just signed up. So we're 2 members away from 1,900. I just got back. I'm kind of getting back in the field. I'm itching to get back out there. There's a lot of things we want to cover in the field. Obviously, John was in Minneapolis recently, North Carolina recently. Jen was just in D.C. all weekend, covering protests, Palestinian protests, covering Amazon events today. But I'm going to try to get back out there pretty soon because that's why we exist. We don't want to just be behind the studio. So definitely support us if you can. Sign up as a member, statuscoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 a month. We're almost at 2,000, so about 100 to go. So we're now at 1,898. So please sign up, statuscoup.com/join. If you have any story ideas, info at statuscoup.com or statuscoup.com/contact. Foot in my mouth. I don't know which one. I'm going to say for now, Jen, is it statuscoup.com/contact? Do I have that right? You'll tell me in the super chat. Statuscoup.com/contact, I believe. Definitely send us your ideas for stories. If you're facing eviction, if you are in financial hardships because of COVID, If your government is basically leaving you screwed, whether it's eviction, leaving you in debt, whatever, we want to know. I'm thinking about taking a reporting road trip. So it'd probably be on the East Coast, Midwest. But definitely email us if you have a story. Definitely people urgently facing eviction or other financial problems. So you can email us for now, info@statuscoup.com, info@statuscoup.com, and I will respond to you and see if we could cover it. Thank you for watching. I will see you tomorrow. Peace out.